Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today we have the opportunity to work on one of the larger in the B series reels from Daiwa. This is a late 1970s, early 1980s fishing reel from Japan. This one is the B400 high-speed reel, and this is about the largest in the series. So a lot of folks look at these reels as classics of the time. You had the silver series, you had the gold series, you had the black and gold series, and you also had the bronze series. And we're going to take this one apart today. We're going to show you how it was made, how to service it if you have one, and how to keep this one fishing for a long time to come. If you like these types of videos, I'm going to recommend that you subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to my channel, please use that notification button to let you know when I'm posting. And, well, you can make a decision as to whether you want to see the video of the day. I try to post on all kinds of fishing reels. I do saltwater, freshwater, everything in between, spinning reels, trolling reels, bait casters, and the like. Well, we start by removing the exterior pieces and parts. And I just remove the handle by turning it in a counterclockwise manner. And one of the things you can note with this reel is it does not have interchangeable sides. So this one was designed as a left-hand crank, and you cannot make it a right-hand crank by switching the handle. On a lot of the Daiwa reels you can, not on this particular version. We removed the star adjuster. Now we can remove the spool. We'll service the spool in a little bit, and we'll come back and continue to remove. Next thing we want to do is remove that axle shaft so that we can get to the bearing underneath. And to do that, we're going to remove the side plate. And one of the things I like to do as I start doing this is I want to turn that anti-reverse off as I'm removing that, because if it is a claw type of anti-reverse that intersects with the main gear, you have a chance to knock it out if you leave it engaged. So turn that off. This also does not have an automatic bail trip feature. This one has what I call the bang bail. When the bail is in the down position, it's going to come around. It's going to hit the stud on that case. That's going to flip it over. So you don't need to worry about any internal trip mechanisms and springs. It's a fairly straightforward setup where you have a spring that will load when you open it up and will collapse the bail once you hit the that side post there. Common feature in the 1970s reels. So Daiwa started making reels, I believe it was the early 1970s, and they had quite a nice series there. Some of them are among the favorites to this day, like the 7000C. All right, we're going to take the 3 screws out. We should be able to remove the side plate. That shows us what's going on here. So we have a main gear that's in the case. This one is kind of grease, I'll call it grease choke. It's got a lot of old greases on there. So this reel has not been serviced in a while. And that's one of the 3 pivot points that you want to address when you're servicing a reel. You want to clean it up, get rid of all the old greases and oils and the like. You want to inspect the pieces and parts to make sure that they're solid and not damaged in any regard. And you want to re-lubricate it to keep it going for a long time to come. So what we're doing right now is, well, we're doing 2 things here. We're inspecting and we're cleaning up. I'm just using a flat-bladed screwdriver just to get the grease off of the shaft there. That all got on the shaft with centrifugal force. As the gear was spinning, it shed the grease to the inside. And, well, you can see there's not a lot of grease left in the teeth here. And that means, well, it hasn't been serviced in a while, and it's time to redo that. So Scott found this reel out on a West Coast flea market find trip. He's done a great job of finding some reels in beautiful condition. This is one of them. This one's a nice survivor. All right, you notice that I put all the old grease onto a paper towel. I do try to keep as much of the grease as I can off my workbench. I'm going to use a little bit of penetrating oil just to clean it up that last little bit. I've used the penetrating oil to dissolve the old greases. And we'll just use a cotton swab now. I guess I could say Q-tip here because it is a Q-tip. But we'll use a cotton swab to just buff out all the rest of it. We'll continue with our inspection. We want to make sure that all of the teeth are uniform, that they're not chipped and cracked. And I'm just going to brush out the channels of that just to make sure that there's no obstructions in the gear itself. All right, it's a relatively very solid gear there. Just a little bit of gunk left over on the side here, so let's get that out of the way. We'll put that into our parts tray. When I remove all my pieces and parts, they go into a parts tray. That's my way of organizing the pieces and keeping track of them as I go to reinstall. I want to make sure that I know where to find them. And it also helps as a reminder because, well, if I'm putting the reel back together again, I may see a part in there that I forgot to put in. That's a great place to relocate it and get it out of there. Take a picture. This is a good place to take a picture. You want to see what it looks like before you start disassembling it because, well, you can make mistakes on reassembly or you can forget how a piece goes or where a screw goes. The picture will help you to identify that. We're going to remove the axle shaft by taking off the flathead screw. And then once that's out, we can pull the axle shaft away from the crosswind block. In this case, it's a little tough. I'm guessing that the metal's a little swollen in there. But just take your time. There's a little gap here. I think I'm just going to try and push it up. There you go. Sometimes when it's sitting a long time, it will get frozen in spots. It's possible that it was right here with this little patch of grease. And again, we want to wipe this down. Check for any scarring or any kind of indication of unusual wear. And a good test on the axle shaft is just does it slide through the pinion gear easily. I'm going to remove the crosswind block now and the crosswind gear. So you can see with this one that the quality of the materials is lesser than it would be on some of the other reels. This is what I would generally call pot metal. It's just a kind of a mishmash of stuff. It's not marine brass or stainless or anything like that. But again, it's a well-made reel. You don't have to worry generally about it. If you take your axle shaft now and just slide it in and out, so long as it's sliding in and out, it's not bent. So sometimes the problem with the reels, particularly the ones you find at flea markets, is that, well, they've suffered some kind of damage, and sometimes that damage is not easily seen. We'll call it hidden damage, if you will. So make sure you thoroughly test a reel that you're thinking about buying as a flea market find. I'm going to use a deep socket here for this one, and I'm going to start by turning it in a counterclockwise manner. If it does not come off in the normal lefty-loosey kind of thing or counterclockwise turn, don't force it. Check to see if it isn't a reverse thread by changing the orientation again. All right, the nut's off. We should be able to remove the rotor now. And you do not need to remove the 3 screws on the top of that rotor that's holding this anti-reverse click ratchet in place. If you do, well, I'm just going to have to put it back together again, but that's not an issue. It's only 3 screws holding it on. Excuse me. I've been fighting a little bit of a cold. While I have that off, I'm going to put a little oil in the seam. We saw there's only a spring under here. You don't need to do anything with it as long as it's working nice and easily. Just make sure that you put a little bit of oil there to free up any dirt that's trapped. Here's your anti-reverse. So it didn't have anything to do with a dog in the main gear, but you know, always err on the side of precaution. This one actually has what I'll call a basic or a standard anti-reverse dog of the day. For the 1970s, there were no instant anti-reverses at that point. Instant anti-reverses didn't come along until the 2000s. And this one simply is in the off position now. And when you go to set it, it'll come in, and then this is your dog that will intersect the ratchet under here, and it'll catch on those slots. We want to do one more thing here. We want to remove the bearing, clean up that pinion. I want to make sure I get that. Yeah, we're in the off position. If you don't put that in the off position, you probably will not be able to install the rotor properly, because that anti-reverse dog will get trapped under that click ratchet when you go to reinstall. Again, it's another opportunity to take a picture here, particularly if maybe your anti-reverse dog is sticking or something and you're trying to free it up and you want to remove it. Well, then you want to pay attention to something like this. This is a spring that's holding the tension on the dog going in. You have a long leg of the spring which wraps around the bottom of the screw here, comes out under the dog, and the U-shaped lip goes on that side. It's always important to note those things, even if you don't have an intention to take it off. From time to time, things just happen. Maybe you bump it, and next thing you know, that leg is off, and you don't know exactly where that came from. This is your collar. Just take a moment to clean that up. That's holding the bearing and the pinion gear in place. This one seems to be a symmetrical collar, so you don't need to worry too much about which side goes where. Some are not, and in those cases you need to note that. Also, while you're noting, note that there's a spring here that controls the cam on that anti-reverse override. Little hole in the side here. Underneath there's a hole in that cam. If you've removed it and you're looking at this video trying to figure out how it goes back together, that's how that goes. Should be able to pull this up and out now. This is a bearing. It's not a bearing, it's a bushing. There you go. So you could replace this if you wanted to with a bearing. Again, when you're thinking about the economies, why is a bronze reel different from a silver reel, different from a gold reel, etc.? Well, it's usually in compromises made to reach certain price points. And one of the things that you would do here is you would make a price point by substituting a bearing for a bushing. Now, I just got a question in, and it was a very interesting question, because somebody who is always in the surf fishing wanted to know if he could find a bushing to replace a bearing. It's usually the other way around, right? But he says, I'm always hip deep in the water. There's always water intrusion coming on, and I don't want to mess up a bearing. I would like to convert this over to a bushing. And well, I haven't heard that one in quite some time in terms of a question. I found it interesting. I thought I would pass that along to you. And I guess the answer is you could do that if you can match up the bushings. It's a whole lot easier to find new bearings when you know the sizing of it. It's a little bit more difficult to find the bushing. All right, once you've kind of cleaned everything up, there's a shim washer that goes on. Then there's an inside collar for the bushing. I put a little bit of grease on there so that collar can free. Put a little bit of grease onto the outside of it so the bushing can ride. Bushing goes on next. And we got a little bit of dirt on the top. So let's go take a moment here to clean that up as well. Okay, that's your top assembly then. Again, if you wanted to hot rod the reel, you can replace that bushing with a bearing. Let's go put that back in. Everything up top is clean. Just reseat it, push it down. Make sure that it seats flush to the case. You don't want it riding high. We'll come back and get the 3-pronged collar and the 3 screws that go with it. And we'll reinstall. Well, if you have any questions on this reel, or any reel in particular, doesn't have to be on this one, leave a question in the comments section. I will try to answer those questions for you. I'll try to help you out. Maybe if you're stuck on a reel, to get you some more information. And we'll see what we can do. Somebody had asked me a question this morning about parts availability for a CatMax reel. And the CatMax reel is it's a store brand of Bass Pro. It doesn't have parts support from outside distributors. So about the only place you can find out if you can even get a part for the reel that you're looking for is contacting Bass Pro. They do usually honor their warranties with repair or replacement, so there are some parts available. I think a lot of times it's just swapping out the reel with another one. But if you run into a problem like that and you can't quite figure out where to go or what to do, or you just want to verify something, yeah, leave that question. I'll see what I can do to answer it for you. Might not like the answer, but I'll just see what I can do to help you find out. All right, so that's back on now. Make sure they're all nice and tight. Underneath we have that click ratchet, so when we go to install the rotor now, we want to make sure we're in the off position on the anti-reverse dog, and then we should just be able to roll that over, take our nut, go ahead and tighten that down, get our ratchet and complete the turning. Now you need to make sure that these nuts are snug, because if they're not snug, you're going to get a wobble in your rotor. And the next thing you know, the line on your reel is going to start taking a figure 8 kind of a look. Once you tighten it up, give it a spin. It spins nice and easily. And, well, we're pretty much at the point of reassembly. I just noticed there's a little bit of old grease left along the side of the case here. We'll get that out. You don't want to leave old grease in there if you can avoid it. And the reason for that is it's going to trap dirt. The dirt eventually becomes abrasive, and the next thing you know, you got something wearing prematurely because of the grit and the grime and the dirt and the salt and whatever else might be in there. All right, normally you would say clean it, but this one's very clean. It doesn't have any greases left. So what we want to do is threefold here. We want to make sure you grease the back in the inner circle, grease the teeth, and this is your jack of all trades gear. It touches everything. So it's driven from the main gear. That offset stud is going to go up and down, and that's going to cause your spool to go up and down in oscillation. When you go to put that on, make sure that the stud is on the bottom. Same thing here. Clean this up. If it's not clean, this is totally clean on both sides. And this is the crosswind block. This is going to hold your axle shaft, and it's going to ride on your oscillation gear. You only need to grease the back of this where that stud is going to ride, and the faceplate where it's going to ride with the main gear. We've cleaned our axle shaft. Just a light coat of grease on that axle shaft is fine. If you put any more on it, it's just going to squeeze out when it goes through here. And we can take that and insert that now. I think we can get the main gear on without having to pass through. Let's go put the main gear in, just as a general practice. So the main gear, it's the same thing. You want to take the grease and get a good amount of grease onto the teeth. And then use fishing reel grease, please. There's a lot of greases out there. Household greases, automotive greases, general purpose greases. There's also fishing reel greases and oils. They're designed for fishing reels. And go ahead and go online if you don't have the fishing reel greases, and just do yourself a favor and go buy a small pack. They come in 1 and 2 ounce containers. You can buy the combination pack with the grease and oil in it, probably 1 ounce containers or something. And it's only going to be about $10 or $12. So don't go using something like axle grease or Vaseline or the like. Yeah, they'll work for a while, but they have their downfalls as well. All right, we've got the cases cleaned. We've reinstalled the main gear. I just need to find my brush now. A little bit of grease onto the shaft that's going to pass through the body. The body is going to act as the bushing for the side case. 3 of those go down. We go into our parts tray and we find the 3 other screws. These screws are all the same size. You want to check that when you're doing your take apart. If there is an oddball size screw in there, one's either longer or shorter or whatever, make sure you note the location of it so that it goes back in the same place. But when all 3 screws are the same, doesn't matter what position they take. So Daiwa at this point in time was also making reels as trade reels. We talked about that Cat Max before being a Bass Pro Shop reel. Well, it's pretty certain that Bass Pro is not manufacturing those, and somebody else is doing it for them. Well, back in the 1970s, Daiwa was making reels for other companies, like a Bass Pro. They made it for Sears, is one that comes to mind. And a lot of the parts are interchangeable with some of the Daiwa self-handed reels. Not all of them, but some of them. Okay, we've got the handle, a little bit of oil onto the slot where that collapsible handle is going to work. And we can go ahead and put this back on. Again, this is a left-hand crank only reel. You cannot switch it around. And that was typical of the 1970s. If you look at the Penn Greenies, for example, if you look at the Mitchell reels of the day, the odd-numbered reels were the reels that you would have a right-hand crank for. And the even-numbered reels would be the ones that were going to be left-handed crank. I'll tighten that all the way up. There's a hole in here for an oil drip, so go ahead and use your oiler and get some oil in there. And then we can turn our attention to the spool. Most of the time on these low-end reels, you're going to have one of two types of drag washers in here. You're going to have a felt washer or a Teflon washer. I'd be surprised if you found a leather washer in these, but we'll find out. To remove the drag stack, you take that 5-sided clip off. We have Teflon washers in here. And we have a little bit of a flexible washer in there. Okay, it feels like it might be rubber. On the flexible washers, you want to put a little bit of grease on there. I'm using dry grease. You don't have to use dry grease. You can use fishing wheel grease. That's fine. The idea behind the greases is to keep those drag washers flexible. All right, I want to clean out that cavity because just like we were saying with the old grease, if you leave dirt in there and debris, one of the problems you're going to have with that is that it's going to become abrasive. That'll cause your drag washers to wear or to become less efficient because it's dragging along a piece of sand or salt or something as opposed to the smooth operation that occurs when there's no obstructions in the way. Well, this is the top washer, but I'm buffing it off just because it happens to be here. I'm using a 4.0 grade steel wool to clean it up, just to remove the old dried grease and dirt there. That's an example of the dirt that can get in. Well, so the first one is it's kind of a rubbery washer, maybe leather. The next two are going to be plastic. You don't need to do anything with the Teflon or plastic washers. They're self-lubricating. They're an oil, a petroleum product. First one that goes in is a round one with the kind of the letter D shape in it. They're called keyed washers. Then we're going to put a clean Teflon washer in. The middle metal washer in the stack is an eared washer. It's got the 2 points on it. And the second of the plastic washers, and then that top one that we cleaned up there, that also has that D shape. And we're going to take that 5-sided spring. It is a spring. Pay close attention to it. Go ahead and put that in, and that's why you can see it wants to shoot out. You can compress it by hand. There is a slot that it rides in. It's a retention clip. Make sure that the clip gets seated into the slot. And then I'm going to just grab a kitchen scrubby that already has a little bit of rod and reel cleaner on it, just to kind of clean up the residue that's on the spool here. Some of it is just worn plating. Some of it is a little bit of dirt. Let's go ahead and find the spool in. This one's nice. This looks like a spider may have taken up residence in this or something. We get a little bit of a cobweb or something in there. I just got a question. Somebody tells me that they can't get their drag loose, and what probably has happened there, there's a nut inside of these cases. You might be able to see it in the camera view here. A lot of times salt water and the like will accumulate under the button. If it gets stored for a long period of time, if the reel doesn't get cleaned out in that nut will rust onto your axle shaft. And well, one of the ways to try and solve for getting that loose is to spray this whole area with WD-40 or another penetrating oil, and turn the reel upside down and try to let it seep in there to break up some of the... All right, I'm going to tighten it down, make sure that the drags are holding. They're holding nicely, and then I'm going to back it up. You don't need to leave the drags engaged. It's not recommended when you're not fishing the reel. So after your trip, loosen it up, take the pressure off the drags. All right, well, everything's done. So what have we done? We've completely disassembled the reel. We did a good cleaning on the reel. We made sure that all of the pieces and parts are good, not damaged. We re-lubricated everything, and now it's time for a final test. So first off, we're in the off position, so we want to test and make sure that it sounds nice and sturdy and clean. It does. Back it up. And now let's put our anti-reverse on. We have that nice loud click-clack that is indicative of these reels. I'll test one more thing, make sure the bail closes. It closes nice and easily. So that's it. That's your Daiwa B400, B being bronze, I believe. And it's a nice reel made in the 1970s. And that's how you take it apart. You service it, you keep it fishing. I hope you've enjoyed the video. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for all it is that you do to keep us safe. To everyone, enjoy the art of reel repair. Keep your tackle ready to go fishing, because you never know when the fish is going to be biting. And, well, it's just a nice thing to have a dependable machine at your side that you don't have to worry about hooking the fish of a lifetime and having it get away because of lack of maintenance. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.